Namaste, everyone, and welcome to our next video introducing one of our wonderful practitioners in the community of holistic practitioners group. Welcome to our viewers, welcome to Jagriti. Before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be viewing this video, whether live or in the recording, as well as my own ancestors and the wisdom keepers of all the traditions that I feel very blessed to learn from. So I forgot this in the last video, but we will do it this time. Let's just take a moment to ground ourselves in our bodies before we start. So yeah, if you're watching the video as well, take a moment to get comfortable, whether you're sitting or standing. Find that long spine, finding the length in your spine, letting your body make some micro adjustments as you just arrive here in this moment through your senses. So, keeping your senses open, taking in the sounds, taking in the smells, maybe noticing some general sensations in the body, like the clothing against your skin and the places where your body makes contact with the earth beneath you. And let's just take some nice full breaths, feeling into the solid earth beneath us. For we are not separate from her. We are made of the same stuff as her, and we are always, in every moment, connected. And when you're ready, from this place of connectedness, I invite you to join into our conversation today with Jagriti. So I know Jagriti from our dance work. I was trying to remember when we met, Jag, but I can't remember. I just remember you do Bollywood, I do Bollywood, and not just we do Bollywood because there's lots of people who do Bollywood. I think there was much more a synergy and an alignment in the way in which we were offering it with this idea of a mind body connection. So this holistic approach, even within Bollywood, I think for me, it was like just meeting someone else who saw through a similar lens, like it's not just about entertainment because as you and I know, coming from our culture, from India and working in our culture, over there it is very much about, it's very much a commercial enterprise and it's about getting 1000 steps per second.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
I felt the same with you, like this
yeah,
alignment in our vision of the purpose behind why we do what we do is very, very much aligned. And to me, it's about light up with dance. It's about helping people get into their bodies and really, really embrace their bodies, connect with their bodies through dance and movement, and how it brings joy. And you and I both know whenever we're in a Bollywood class that we're conducting, there's not one frowning face. It's so difficult to be frowning when you're moving like that and you're listening to that music and feeling uplifted. So it's such
yes,
a privilege to be doing this work.
absolutely right. At some point in my life, I will do some research into Bollywood dance as a therapeutic approach.
Mhm.
I have kind of gone halfway through funding applications, but I haven't sort of gotten right through it because there's something unique about this particular style.
Yeah,
As a professional dancer, I've done all within my 30 years of professional dance, I've pretty much done all styles of dance. But there's something about how Bollywood engages the whole body, right?
yeah,
Right down to your fingertips and your eyeballs sometimes,
yeah.
right?
You can do that. I can't do that. That's amazing. Totally. And what I love about it is it's so inclusive. So you don't have to master it like an art form like ballet, Kathak, Bharatanatyam. It's
Yes,
very inclusive, and also it's all about storytelling and expressing emotions. So it
yes.
really connects us to our inner world, not just the body. So yeah, it really is unique. I love that idea. I think you should totally no, no one else
I,
is going to do it. You should do it.
we will do it. I'm in the process of potentially collaborating with a colleague to start an organization called the South Asian Creative Arts Therapy Organization.
Wow.
And we will be, I mean, a big reason, the purpose of it is going to be doing research because, you know, just before we started, we were talking about how we need to elevate our voices. So, you know,
Yeah.
women of color, people of color, with especially within the wellness and mental health space. So that's what we're hoping to do is to have more culturally aware approaches within the mental health and creative arts therapy fields because we don't feel like it's currently addressing South Asian, you know, so Indian, Bangladeshi, Nepalese, Sri Lankan, you know,
Yeah.
all of our cultural stories
Yeah.
and how we make sense of the world. You know, we were again we touched on the goddess earlier, but before I go ahead, because we could just go
I
down
know.
different pathways. Tell us a little bit about you know, we've talked about the dance side of things,
Yeah.
but what is the fullness now of what you offer, and maybe a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll start off with sort of my cultural background and how I got to where I am. Because, yes, dance is very much a part of my life, but it's not so much dance that I'm offering as a gift to the world. It's more our experiencing ourselves and different aspects within ourselves. And part of that is through movement, through dance, but it's not entirely limited to that. And so before I go into this goddess wheel that came to me. I sort of received a download about in 2017 when I was coming home after a night of partying, coming home early at 11 p.m. But then this sort of goddess wheel just appeared to me out of nowhere. And since then, I've been exploring it and sharing it. And it's quite magical, the impact it has on people. But before going into that, let me just share a bit about the sort of cultural upbringing, the background. So I'm from India. Initially, I came to Australia when I was 4 years old. So very much part of the Australian and Indian culture. It's very much alive in me, and it's interesting. I've had great curiosity around um, you know, Hinduism. I grew up as a Hindu, so there's so many festivals in Hinduism that you grow up with as a child. And one that stood out to me was Navratri. And Navratri is a 9 days, 9 nights goddess festival celebrating the goddesses. And at the end of the festival, we did this thing called kanjak. Now, I'm not sure if kanjak is all throughout India or if it's a North Indian tradition, but what happens is at the end of the festival, sort of to conclude it, you invite little girls from the neighborhood to your house and you pray to them, you wash their feet, you know, and all the daughters and the girls in the house, they get this treatment. So I'd sit there, my dad would be washing my feet and feeding me sweets and giving me like money and gifts and things like that. And that went on till a certain point until the girl hits puberty, and somehow that tends to stop then, which I found very interesting because it's almost like when I hit puberty and my sexuality is starting to come alive, all of a sudden that just stopped. And I was trying to make sense of it. And to me, it was a lot about this Puritan um, approach to religion that we often have, and the way goddesses are meant to be seen as very pure, demure. Um, the masses want to see them in a particular light. They want to see the feminine as being sweet and kind and looking beautifully adorned in these gorgeous dresses with perfect makeup. So we have these goddesses like Lakshmi and Saraswati and Durga even, who is quite a fierce goddess, all represented beautifully. And in my late 20s, I found out about other goddess archetypes within my culture. And I'm specifically referring to the tantric goddesses called Das Mahavidyas, the 10 wisdoms. And when I came across these goddesses through my exploration of Tantra, I was in awe of them because they were depicted as quite grotesque, quite fierce, quite dark, nothing like the goddesses I grew up with as a child. And I was like, are these really from India? Are these really from my culture? And so I went on this journey trying to find people, wisdom holders from my culture, to share with me a bit more about these goddess archetypes. I was curious about them. I wanted to know, who are they? How can I embody them? What makes them different? Why are they not talked about? Why are they not shared? And majority of the people in my culture hadn't heard of them. They, as soon as they hear the words like tantra, they just look away. It's like dark, dirty, vulgar. Something is, disturbing about it. So I had to go to non-Indian people, this amazing Greek man who does yoga and he teaches about goddesses, such a lovely man, and this lady from England who was living in Australia. So I had to turn to them to learn about goddesses from my culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it really occurred to me, and we were talking about this earlier, how it's just so sad that I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but it's so sad that we are learning about our own culture through white people, and people of color are not sharing, not speaking up, not really having a voice.
Mm,
And even when you go searching for someone of that tradition or culture to share with you, sometimes it's just so hard to find.
yeah.
So, but I'm very honored that I did get that information. But it was sad for me that there's no one from my culture that could share it with me.
So it's really interesting, Jagriti. Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't actually know of, that your whole kind of story of coming here as a 4-year-old and how you've brought together an integrated Indian culture and Australian culture and your own kind of search. Um, there's a few things I just wanted to feed back to you, I guess. This idea of the dark feminine being lost in our culture is very much for me. It's a remnant of the British Raj,
Mm,
right? Because pre the British rule,
mm,
Tantra and the goddesses were dark and light.
yeah.
So like Shiva is one of my chosen deities, let's say. I really resonate with Shiva, but Shiva has dark aspects and light aspects. And in fact, all the gods and goddesses in all the mythologies all over the world have integrated light and shadow. And it's
Mhm.
only post Christianity, because Christianity separates heaven and hell.
Mm,
So that's where the separation of the dark and light happens. And
mm,
I find it very much the ripple effect of patriarchy in terms of what you were saying, that people just want the feminine to be frilly and soft and beautiful and kind, even though, Durga and Kali, they all have severed heads and blood and gore as the original
mm.
iconography, the original
Yeah.
images in our own culture. So there's that aspect of it, of how even within a secular country like India is, where all religions and everything, people go on pilgrimages to India, and there's
Yeah.
pray love, and all these different takes on where, people go to India to find themselves and go on
Yeah.
this spiritual quest. And I think, relatively speaking, yes, the presence of spirituality and God, relatively is a lot more, it is very much in your face.
Yeah.
It's not hidden. But
Mm.
but that was, yeah, I found that really interesting that even within our own traditions, there is this separation of dark and light,
Mm.
and that, you had to then go into other spaces, and that other side of things, where within the wellness world, even with our Indian spiritual traditions and practices, you don't often see brown voices or hear brown voices. And
Mm.
that's a whole other, you know, I'll just park it there because that's
Yeah.
very loaded and there's a lot of stuff in that. But I would love to hear more about, this idea of the archetypes. It's funny because we spoke about it in the last session as well. And just for viewers who may not be aware, I can share my understanding, and I think each person will have their own slightly different understanding of what an archetype is, because we're tapping into those unconscious realms,
Mm.
right? So you can only understand an archetype at the level of consciousness of where you're at.
Mm.
And then there's this sort of like an opening to like you mentioned earlier about if you're in the nurturing goddess and you need the warrior goddess, but you can't access that,
Mm.
that's where I'm imagining your work,
Yeah.
it would be offering people that pathway to be able to access. And for me, an archetype is, they're like these universal symbols. Jung talks about it like this framework or structure of the psyche itself. So we all have it, and we all have these energies in us. Some of them are expressed more than others, and sometimes one can take over us. So, again, coming back to your example of the nurturing goddess archetype. So, the nurturing goddess can hijack our system, and we get pulled into those energies and almost kind of stuck in those energies and need a way out.
Yes.
So yes, I would love to hear about archetypes, your goddess archetype framework, and maybe a little bit about how you work with people and with these archetypes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, uh, in order to get to where I was with these goddess archetypes, how they came to me, what happened was that I became very curious about wanting to know about the gods and goddesses in my culture. How do we embody them? How do we embrace their qualities within ourselves? How can I be a reflection of the divinity that I'm praying to? So rather than having arm's length distance from the gods and praying to them for things like, oh, give me strength, give me this, give me that. How can I become their qualities? Embody their qualities. And so I went on this journey trying to find this out, and it was a torturous experience because people, for Navratri, for example, they'll be praying to the goddesses, and I'll ask, tell me the difference between Lakshmi and uh, Durga, for example, but they'll only really be able to tell me what they can give. So Lakshmi gives you wealth and abundance, and Durga gives you strength and courage. I'm like, okay, but who are they? What are they like? You
Mm.
know? And so I started for Navratri. There are 9 goddesses that people often look at: Siddhidatri, Kalaratri, and quite 9 different goddesses. And what I started to do as my practice is I just simply sat almost in like meditation and invited them to take over me, show me who you are. And I just became them. I noticed them taking over me. And each archetype, it's the experience of that goddess was quite phenomenal. It was profound. And as I experienced it without looking at notes and things like that about them, I noticed once I started looking at notes, the similarities and what they represented. So that was really interesting. So anyway, through my dance journey, my spiritual practices, I've been a meditator for probably over 12 years. And when I talk about meditation, it's not necessarily sitting still with your eyes closed and being really stiff type of meditation. It can be like just being present and aware of what's happening within you. This is what came to me, and I'd like to share it on the screen, if I may, just so people have a reference and it's easy for me to go through it. Let's call this the goddess wheel or a pizza, goddess pizza. One day after a night out, like I said, I came home and suddenly had this download, and I was scribbling on this piece of paper, and these words came to me. Now, I had been doing work in the Bollywood space by helping women tap into different parts of themselves through Bollywood dance. Like it will be like a cheeky babe experience or a warrior babe, and using music and dance and choreography, I'll get them to access that part of themselves. So that was happening in the background, but this really came to me with great clarity, and these words came to me. And some of the words I have a lot of resistance towards still, but these were the words that were, I guess, just my inner voice just said it. I don't know, or it's coming from source or somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just go through the 8 goddess archetypes. There's mystic goddess, and in order to tap into her, you tap into your intuition. And I'm going through this really quickly and briefly. Wild goddess. In order to tap into wild goddess, you tap into acceptance of self and others and nature and the world. Nurturing goddess is about tapping into your sense of responsibility, again, for self and others. Erotic goddess is all about pleasure in the sense of pleasure through our 5 senses, and also sexual pleasure, but not limited to that. Cheeky goddess, she's all about fun, and that's how you access her. And magnetic goddess, she's about vulnerability. So in order to tap into your magnetic goddess, it's about tapping into your vulnerability. Warrior goddess is attaching yourself to a cause that matters to you, that you are willing to die on the battlefield for, something that is so important to you. Initially, I thought discipline would be what warrior goddess, how you tap into warrior goddess, but I realized that discipline is forced in a way, whereas when you're attached to a cause that's strong enough, then you tend to do what's required without forcing yourself, because it's just so within you, inbuilt in you, and that cause is driving you. Mysterious goddess is all about surrendering, I guess. A teacher of mine once said this, like, I surrender my will to divine will, and that's what she's about. So with these goddess archetypes, I guess the way I've worked with them, I've conducted retreats, I've conducted one-on-one coaching sessions, and they have many applications. In a way, looking at yourself and the world through this lens can really be exciting. You know, it's a fun way, an interesting way to look at yourself, rather than you know, like we can also use superheroes as an example to look at ourselves and different archetypes. So for example, a lot of these archetypes, if we're so bound, like identified with them to the point where we are stuck in them, like you said earlier, out of habit or conditioning or practice, then we don't experience our whole selves. And this group is about holistic practitioners and healing. And it's about really looking at yourself and the world as a whole and noticing the patterns and the connections. So what I tend to find is that most people are, about 2 or 3 archetypes are very much alive in them on a daily basis. And sometimes a situation may require them to tap into a different part of themselves, which they are not accustomed to going into or expressing. And so by understanding that we are all of these, and these are possibilities within us, we can actually consciously choose how we want to show up in a given situation. So for example, I worked with a woman who had 4 sons. She was really busy, single mum, and she was on the board of a kindergarten school, and she was doing most of the things out of volunteering, not really making any money as such. She came to me, and what we realized is that she is very much in her nurturing goddess all the time. Like majority of the time, she's feeling a deep sense of responsibility for others, to the point where she has lost her ability to have clear boundaries. And often she's walked all over. People don't hear her voice when she speaks in the boardroom or when she speaks to her children. They're not paying attention to her. And she felt like she's not being seen or heard, yet she feels this deep sense of responsibility of wanting to make a difference to others. So I helped her tap into warrior goddess by embodying her. And it was incredible just through movement and experience of what her warrior is. Our expressions are all different. So it's about going in on an inward journey for yourself to discover what these archetypes mean to you. She found that when she was able to embody the warrior goddess in herself and walk like her and just be like her, walk into the room like her, she noticed she was being listened to. And it wasn't about what she's saying or doing differently. It was simply because she was being different within herself. She was accessing that part of herself that when it shows up, people notice, oh, I don't mess with that, you know. And it's just she had clearer boundaries without having to necessarily express those boundaries because they were just in the way she was being. So that was a great example. And I have many such examples of people I've worked with who have explored these archetypes. And so I
Yeah.
just wanted to share this.
No, sounds actually sounds very similar to how we work in dance therapy. Um,
Mhm.
and you know, I guess for people to understand this is more a bottom-up approach than a top-down approach. When you use the body to access things, it's what we call in psychotherapy and the mental health space, we call it a bottom-up approach. So rather than top-down, where
Mm,
you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, for example, you know, these are top down. Talk therapy is top down, where you're thinking something and you're trying to then direct your body to do things in a different way, versus what you've talked about, which is um, from the bottom up,
mm,
right? When you can, in dance therapy, we talk about when you can access a different way of being in your body, being in the world.
mm,
What you're doing is actually you're creating a new neural pathway there.
mm,
Yeah? So maybe this person who'd never accessed warrior um, uh, energy and embodiment and, you know, uh, being in the world, she was able to, through creative play,
mm,
right? Like that's what the creative arts therapy, dance therapy, and by the way, for anyone listening, that's the space that I come from. So I will always bring it back to the trauma lens and the dance therapy lens and creative arts lens, because it helps to make sense of what's going on there. And it makes absolute sense to me as a body-based practitioner that in creating that framework and space, firstly, of depathologizing the behaviors,
mm,
right? Because this over nurturing could be labeled codependency, could be labeled relationship addict, could be labeled, you know, there's all these different ways
yeah.
that we can name something. But I find, and this is why the transpersonal approach, which includes archetypal work, is so helpful, because it depathologizes. It just goes, okay, so if you're doing so much of this, what else do you need to balance
Yeah.
that out? Right? How do we balance that out? Because everything is in you. All
Yes.
of those goddesses, you know, warrior, mystic, wild,
Mm,
they're all in you, but we get over identified. And I think this
yes.
is an important piece, because we're living the current global environment in which we're living in is so over identified with identity.
Mm,
You
yeah.
know, it's like, this is who I am, and this is only who I am, and
Yeah.
this is who I will be forever. And it's like, no,
Mm,
identity is not fixed.
mm,
It's fluid. And
yeah.
that's what I see as almost like a visual when I see your goddess wheel, Jagriti, is like, you know, you're in the center dancing through all of
Yeah.
the different versions and choosing. That's where
Yeah.
empowerment comes from, right?
Yeah.
Choosing which one is appropriate, because your nurturing goddess is not the one you want at work,
Yeah.
right? I mean, yes, you can turn her on and off.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I'm hearing is you're helping people to be able to turn these things on and off where maybe they're stuck in one or
Yeah.
not able to access another. And I love that it's a body-based, bottom-up approach. Uh,
Mm.
it's also creative arts and you know
Yeah.
dance movement therapy approach, and using what is already there, right?
Yes, and what's interesting is I don't always use the bottom up approach because what I do when I do this work is all channeled. I sit there before I have to see a client. I sit there for a few hours channeling and tuning into what does this person need. So if communicating to them through a body-based approach is going to be ineffective, then I will use another approach that will come to me. So it's very important for me to be flexible myself in how I approach this, and all of this is guided for me. And yeah, absolutely. I think that one thing my guru Sadhguru said, and which really stuck with me, is we want to go through life asking ourselves, what is required of me in this moment? What is required of me in this situation? Not just who am I and I'm just going to show up as that every time. We are so much more than we can even possibly imagine. So what is required of me in this situation? And when we start asking that question, we can start playing with everything that we are and express ourselves in that moment that the moment requires, not just what I require, but the moment requires it, So um
Mm,
yeah.
beautiful. That actually reminds me, there's another he's a rabbi and he's a philosopher and he's a spiritual teacher, let's say, and he speaks to this as well. He actually says there's three spiritual questions. One is, who am I? Two is, where am I? Right? Where am I in my journey or in my life or in this space? And the
Mm,
third is, what am I here to do?
mm,
So who
love
am
it.
I? Where am I? And from this place, what is it that I am here to do?
Yes.
Right? And it's an ongoing, I think it's a question we ask ourselves moment to moment because it
Mm,
keeps evolving and changing. And again, that's this the beauty of having a fluid sense of who you are in the
mm,
world. And this idea also of the gods and goddesses. I mean, we probably should have mentioned this earlier, but in the Hindu context, they're not out there,
mm,
they're in here. And what we're seeing out there is a representation of what exists in here. And all of those different forms are different forms of the same one source. So,
yes.
most people, if I ever have a conversation about Hindu religion, the first thing I always say is it's not polytheistic.
Mm,
We don't believe in multiple gods, even though it looks like that because there's like hundreds and thousands of them.
yeah.
But the idea is that there is one for everyone, whoever you
Yeah.
are in the world. There is a pathway, and you can choose Ganesh or you can choose Shiva or you can choose Durga or you can choose Kali. I find a little bit like there's a level of appropriation that happens with the god and goddess language where people are like, yeah, I'm being Kali, and I'm like, dude, you're not being Kali. Kali is not pretty, and you really don't want to be invoking her because it's
Yeah.
quite, you want to be honoring and honoring her when she arrives, but
Yeah.
you don't want to invoke
Mm,
Kali
yeah.
because she will teach you through distraction. If you're
Yeah.
already in distraction, then you can say, yes, thank you, blessings from Kali. She's teaching me, she's showing me the truth of
Yeah.
what is here with all this chaos and destruction. So I love that there's a brown voice,
Yeah.
that there's a cultural representative who is bringing these ideas into a more contemporary context, right? It's
Exactly.
the uh what's the word I'm looking for, when it's non-denominational, you're taking
Yeah.
religious, you're taking out the religion, but holding on to the wisdom,
Yeah.
and sharing that in a it sounds like in a very sort of palatable, digestible way. Um,
Thank you for acknowledging that, because it's interesting you're saying that. I was guided not to share about the goddesses from our culture. I was actually guided not to, because there's already so much pretext and conditioning around them, and also how they're represented. And there's a lot of like I guess people are so locked into seeing Kali in a certain way, seeing Durga in a certain way, that if you even challenge that, then it can turn into this whole other thing, you know. And like you mentioned, that patriarchal lens with which we are taught to look at a lot of these aspects of ourselves. If you challenge that, then you get too caught up in the whole debating of it and the fighting and all of this. And I think the reason why I got this goddess wheel downloaded to me in this way is so that it can be inclusive and accessible, and it's not attached to any type of cultural you know, like icons or anything like that. So yeah, and thank you for noticing that, because that's something that really was very clear to me that came. Yeah.
yeah, it's a wonderful way of sort of reclaiming the wisdom, but without a commodification of our spiritual traditions.
Yes.
I feel like, the goddess language and Durga, Kali, Saraswati, Lakshmi, they're not, it's not Chadston, you know.
Mm.
You can't just go shopping for goddesses, but sometimes that's what it feels like. So I love that, as I said, because one of the ways that I work as well, Jagriti, is seeing the wisdom, extracting the wisdom that is there, because it's actually there in all traditions,
Yes.
different forms. And when you start studying and researching, you start to see, oh, so they're saying the same thing, they're saying the same thing, and they're saying the same thing. There must be something in that same thing that they're
Yes.
saying,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And I think the same thing that we hear in most religions is that, the power, the wisdom, the divine is within, and we can access that. So, I mean, I'm just gonna pause it there and let
I
you
just want to, yeah, I
share.
just want to add one thing. I just want to make it very, very clear, because people, especially lately, are getting very antsy and uptight about the use of the word goddess or anything feminine or women, etc., etc. And I just want to make it clear that this is not about bashing masculine or man bashing in any way. I believe that we need a world that's integrated and very much the light, the dark, the masculine, the feminine, the yin and the yang, bringing them together. I personally believe that there has been an imbalance in what we value in the world, and more heart, more intuition, more of the feminine is required to step up. And
Mhm.
sharing that in a loving, compassionate way and including people in it is my approach. And it's certainly not about saying one way of being is wrong and the other way of being is right. It's
Mhm.
simply about, here's an invitation for you to explore yourself through this lens, if you wish, and see what you discover. And that's pretty much where I'd leave it, you know. And it's and when we even talk about the patriarchy, I certainly don't mean to imply that the masculine is not needed in our world and a masculine approach is not needed.
Mhm.
What I get sick of is having to force myself to see even the feminine aspects of archetypes and these goddesses from a masculine perspective only, and limiting it to that. That's what frustrates me.
Mhm.
But it's certainly not the masculine.
Absolutely. And even, drawing on our spiritual traditions, Jagriti, Shiva and Shakti don't exist
Without each other.
without each other.
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
find that framework of understanding so much easier when we speak in terms of Shiva and Shakti, in terms of the energies, because
Yes.
words masculine, feminine, goddess, woman have become so loaded.
Yeah.
And I guess, one of the things I've been feeling into around this is kind of recognizing that words are just pointing to something.
Mm.
Like when we use the word moon. the word moon cannot possibly encapsulate the whole experience of the moon,
Mm,
right? Like but it's a word that we use to represent something. You
yeah.
know, so there's a song, oh, what was it? I think it was from The Sixth Sense. There's a line of, or even I think there's in Rumi's poetry, there's a line that, when you're pointing to the moon, don't mix up the finger pointing to the moon with the moon itself. So
Beautiful.
the word is just pointing to something when we use the word masculine, feminine, patriarchy, that we're just pointing to something, but actually these things are interconnected all the time. Masculine
Exactly.
and feminine are never separate. You
Exactly. And the
cannot.
thing is, we're the ones giving it meaning. So
We
the
have
word,
separated,
we're
absolutely,
interpreting the meanings of things, and then I think it's
and
dividing
fighting over
society.
it.
Yes, we're fighting over what to.
No, my meaning is more true than your meaning.
Oh, it's just laughable. That's exactly what's happening.
It
Yeah,
can be, yes. I do believe that part of it is because they need the mystic goddess. We've
yeah,
lost sight of mystery, that there are only some things that are known,
yes,
many more things that are unknown,
yes,
and to make space for that mystery, but it requires them to tap into, and that's the one that's most repressed, I think, in our culture, is the mystic, you
mm.
know, the mystic
Yeah.
who has
There,
direct experience of the divine, not just words,
yeah. Absolutely. I recently conducted a wild goddess workshop just a couple of days ago. And for the participants, I created a 10-minute guided visualization for people to tap into their wild goddess. It's not in a way that you might imagine, which is rah, rah, chaos, but it's more about self-love and self-acceptance. And
Mm,
I'd love to share it with anyone in this group that might be interested. So just
mm.
ping me on, and I'll email you the MP3 because it's a really beautiful gentle way to embrace yourself and everything that you are, light, dark, all of it, So yeah.
Beautiful. That reminds me of, I mean, I was going to say it reminds me of Kali, but that I'm assuming that's what mystic goddess is based on, because it's that the idea of fierce love, you know,
Yeah.
fierce love. This is what the Western interpretations of Kali miss, is
Mm,
that she's fierce like that and she's sticking her tongue out like that in love.
yeah. It's
It's
all love.
fierce. It's all love. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hari Om. On that note, Jagriti, would love to hear. I mean, you did mention, so if anyone wants to get the recording,
Audio. Hmm.
the audio, they can just comment below this video.
Yeah.
If anyone puts hashtag reply, either Jagrati or myself will do a search on that and respond to your comments. So we'll definitely share your details as well, but just let everyone know what your website is and what your
Yeah.
current offerings are,
Yeah.
and we'll post
So
the links below.
thank you. So I have a few businesses, but I'll just share my Bollywood page because that's the one I access the most. So info@ignitebollywood.com. If
Yep.
you email me at that and ask for that guided visualization, Wild Goddess, then I'll send it to you. I don't want you sharing your private information publicly, so you just email me directly. And www.ignitebollywood.com for now is with my Bollywood dance business. But if you're interested in the goddess coaching, you can reach out and even through that, and I'll contact you in return. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I was just going to take a moment to pause. If there's anything else that you wish to share, our community of holistic practitioners group, of course, has got various practitioners and other people interested in holistic approaches. I'll also share it on my business page in case anyone is interested. So, anything else that's present right now that you wish to share, Jagriti?
Just that it's been such an honor and privilege to be in this space with you. And I really appreciate what you're doing with including the practitioners and having conversations with them to showcase them, because oftentimes we're doing our work, we're offering things, our gifts to the world, but we're not necessarily making it a priority to be seen or to be shared. And you're creating this platform for us to be seen. So I really genuinely appreciate that. And I love the work that you're doing as well. I feel so aligned. I feel like we're sisters doing our work and in the world, and it's just such an honor.
Thanks, Jagriti. I appreciate your feedback and your presence. And yes, as we mentioned at the start, I think it's always nice to find alignment with
Mm,
people out there.
mm,
When we first met as well, I was like, oh, look, there's someone else doing something similar. And
mm.
the way that I see that is not from a competition framework. It's more of, oh, look, there's more of us.
Yes.
And we're all doing this work together so there's that sense of kinship, which I really appreciate. And yeah, look, I don't know where this idea came from, but I'm very much a follow the inspiration kind of person. So I don't know where this is going, or what this is for, but like yourself, when something comes through, you got to pay attention. So
Yeah.
this is what came through for me, and I'm surprised at how much I'm enjoying it. So, yeah, thank you for being here. And to
Thank
anyone
you.
else, if there's any questions that you have for Jagriti or myself in relation to anything that we spoke about today, please feel free to comment, engage with us, engage with this post. We are not slaves to the algorithm, but we would appreciate your comments and likes and shares. Until next time, I'm not sure who's going to be our next practitioner, but until we meet again, Jagati, have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and over and out at my
Thank,
end.
thank you. Thank you. Bye.